The ground trembles on Constitution Avenue, Washington, D.C., but this is no storm. It's the rumble of 5,000 motorcycles approaching the nation's capital. The sound echoes off the marble monuments, growing louder with each passing second. On their front porch on Maryland Avenue, Sarah Johnson grips her husband Tom's hand. After 50 Memorial Day weekends together, they thought they'd seen it all. Red, white, and blue banners flutter in the heavy summer air. The temperature reads 95 degrees on the bank's digital sign across the street. "Tom, look there," Sarah whispers, pointing toward the intersection. "Something's different this year." Through the heat waves rising from the pavement stands a lone figure, a United States Marine in crisp dress blues. His medals catch the morning sun, his white gloves gleam, but it's his eyes that catch everyone's attention, fixed straight ahead, unblinking, as if seeing something the rest of them can't. This is Sergeant Timothy "Tim" Chambers, though the crowd doesn't know his name yet. At 45, he stands ramrod straight, right arm raised in a perfect salute. Only those standing closest can see what the Marine is trying so hard to hide. His left leg, injured in combat, trembling from the strain. The roar of motorcycles grows deafening. The first riders appear over the hill, their chrome bikes glinting in the sunlight. But Tim doesn't move, doesn't blink, doesn't lower his salute. Sarah leans forward in her chair. "How long has he been standing there?" Tom checks his watch, then looks back at the Marine. "Going on an hour now." He pauses, watching Tim's legs shake. In this heat, he can't keep this up much longer. But Sarah sees something in the Marine's face that her husband doesn't. "Yes," she says quietly. "Yes, he can, and he will." The question isn't whether the Marine will endure. The question is why. Heroes come in all forms, sometimes in dress blues, sometimes in leather vests. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe we should never judge a book by its cover. Let's hear your stories about unexpected heroes in your community. 20 years earlier, in the quiet town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, two young boys raced through morning mist that cloaked the Civil War monuments. Tim and Mark Chambers, identical twins down to their matching crew cuts, played hide and seek among the silent cannons and marble statues of long-gone soldiers. "Boys," a deep voice called out, "show some respect for where you're standing." Their grandfather, retired Master Sergeant James Chambers, walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from his tours in Vietnam. Every Sunday morning, he'd bring his grandsons to these hallowed grounds, teaching them about sacrifice, honor, and the price of freedom. "You see these names?" Grandpa James would say, running his weathered fingers over the cold stone. Each one was somebody's son, somebody's brother. His voice would grow quiet then. Somebody's friend. The twins soaked up every word. They'd sit for hours on Cemetery Ridge, listening to their grandfather's stories about his own brothers in arms, how they'd saved each other, fought for each other, died for each other. Then came that clear September morning in 2001. Tim and Mark sat frozen in their high school classroom, watching the second plane hit. By afternoon, they'd made their decision. Their mother found the Marine Corps recruitment papers on the kitchen table that evening. "Mom," Tim said softly, "this is what Grandpa trained us for." Catherine Chambers tried to be strong. She'd known this day might come. Military service ran deep in their blood. But knowing didn't make it easier. On the morning they left for boot camp, she straightened their collars one last time, just as she had on their first day of kindergarten. "Promise me you'll watch out for each other," she whispered, holding back tears. "Always, Mom," the twins answered in unison, the way they had since they could talk. At the bus station, Tim glanced back one last time. His mother stood tall, waving bravely. But his grandfather's face showed something different, pride mixed with worry. The old Marine knew what his grandsons were heading into. He knew the true weight of the promise they'd just made. The bus pulled away from small-town Gettysburg, carrying Tim and Mark Chambers toward their destiny. They were 18 years old, twins born just 2 minutes apart, heading off to become United States Marines. Neither brother could have known then that only one of them would return. The Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan rose like jagged teeth against a copper sky. 4 years had passed since that morning at the Gettysburg bus station. Tim and Mark Chambers were no longer fresh-faced recruits, but battle-hardened Marines, serving near the scene of Operation Red Wings. Their unit patrolled the steep ridges where, just months earlier, 19 Americans had lost their lives in one of the deadliest days in Special Operations history. The twins moved with practiced precision, reading each other's signals without a word, a bond that had only grown stronger in combat. "Movement, 2 o'clock," Tim whispered, his rifle trained on a rocky outcrop. Mark's response was cut short by the crack of gunfire. The first bullet kicked up dust at their feet. The second found its mark in Tim's leg. What happened next played out in slow motion, like a nightmare Tim would relive every night for years to come. As he fell, Mark lunged forward, shielding his brother's body with his own. Their eyes met one final time. "I got you, little brother," Mark said with a slight smile, using the old joke about being born 2 minutes earlier. Then his eyes went distant, focusing on something Tim couldn't see. The medevac helicopter arrived 14 minutes later, but for Tim, it had been an eternity. He held his brother, repeating the promise they'd made to their mother. "Always, Mom. Always." Back at Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Tim's physical wounds healed slowly, but the deeper wound, the one left by Mark's sacrifice, seemed beyond repair. His mother visited daily, bringing home-cooked meals and forced smiles. His grandfather sat silently beside him, understanding the weight of survival in a way only another combat veteran could. "Why him?" Tim asked one day, staring out the hospital window. "Why did he do it?" His grandfather's reply was simple: because he was a Marine, because you were his brother, because that's what we do. The words echoed in Tim's mind now as he stood on Constitution Avenue, arm raised in salute. His injured leg trembled, but he wouldn't lower his arm. Couldn't lower his arm. This wasn't just a salute to passing bikers or fallen warriors. This was for Mark. The rumble started as a distant growl. Tim's arm remained steady in salute, even as worried whispers rippled through the crowd. The sound grew louder, like approaching thunder, until the ground itself seemed to vibrate beneath their feet. "Someone should call the police," a woman clutched her purse tighter. "They'll ruin everything," another voice joined in. Over the hill they came, a sea of black leather and gleaming chrome. Hundreds of motorcycles, their engines drowning out all other sounds on Constitution Avenue. Leading them was a massive figure, his arms covered in faded tattoos, his gray beard whipping in the wind. The crowd drew back instinctively. Parents pulled their children closer. Several people reached for their phones, ready to record whatever trouble was about to unfold. The bikers circled once, their engines roaring. Then, with military precision, they formed a wall around Tim. The leader cut his engine first, the sudden silence almost as deafening as the noise had been. He dismounted slowly, his leather vest creaking. The patches on it caught the sunlight, something about veterans, but most people were too nervous to read them closely. He walked toward Tim with purpose, reaching into his jacket. Time seemed to freeze. Then the big man stopped, and to everyone's surprise, he raised his hand in a perfect military salute. "Doc," his voice carried across the silence, "bring the water. Our brother needs it." A younger biker stepped forward, holding out a bottle of water. With gentle movements that seemed impossible from such large hands, he helped Tim drink without breaking his salute. One by one, the bikers joined the salute. No one spoke. No one needed to. One by one, the bikers joined the salute. No one spoke. No one needed to. The crowd watched in stunned silence as these men and women whom they'd feared moments ago formed a protective circle around Tim. Their leather vests now revealed what few had noticed before: patches of military service, combat medals, and unit insignias. The summer heat beat down mercilessly. Sweat trickled down Tim's face, but his salute never wavered. Without a word, a biker pulled an umbrella from his saddlebag, holding it carefully to shade the Marine. Another positioned a small portable fan, its breeze offering slight relief. A young girl, no more than 7, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can I give them my water?" Her mother hesitated, then nodded. The child approached with her Hello Kitty water bottle, offering it to a towering biker with tattoo-covered arms. He knelt down to her level, accepted it with a gentle smile, and added it to their growing supply line for Tim. The gesture sparked something. Local shop owners emerged from their stores with bottles of water and sports drinks. A food cart vendor wheeled over with bags of ice. An office worker arrived with a stack of paper fans she'd made at her desk. News crews that had gathered to cover the Memorial Day events turned their cameras toward this unexpected scene. Social media exploded with images of the lone Marine and his unlikely honor guard. "Look at his leg," someone whispered, noticing Tim's trembling limb. But before concern could spread, the bikers tightened their circle. They understood something the crowd didn't, that some battles must be fought alone, even in the midst of support. Hour 5 turned into Hour 6. The sun began its descent, painting the Washington Monument in shades of amber and gold. Still, Tim stood. Still, the bikers remained. Then something remarkable happened. A group of businessmen in suits removed their jackets and joined the salute. A tourist family from Japan bowed deeply before raising their arms. 3 teenagers put down their phones and straightened their backs, hands raised in respectful tribute. The elderly couple on their porch, Sarah and Tom Johnson, watched as the scene before them transformed into something they'd never seen in 50 years of Memorial Days. The divide between leather and linen, between Chrome and Calvin Klein, between assumption and reality, all of it melted away under the setting sun. "They've been judged wrong their whole lives," Tom said softly, watching the bikers maintain their vigil, "just like our boys coming home from Nam." Sarah squeezed his hand, remembering those difficult days. As darkness approached, red and blue lights appeared in the distance, but not from police cars. The bikers had arranged for a military color guard. The American flag approached, carried with precision by Marines in dress blues. Only then did the leader of the bikers speak again, his voice carrying across the now hushed avenue. "Stand down, Marine. Your watch is over." Tim held the salute for one final breath, then slowly, with dignity despite his exhausted muscles, lowered his arm. 7 hours had passed since he'd first taken his post. 7 hours under the scorching sun. 7 hours of honoring Mark and every other brother and sister who never came home. The leader of the bikers stepped forward, his weathered face catching the last rays of sunlight. Up close, Tim could see the Marine Corps insignia tattooed on his forearm, like had partially hidden under decades-old scars. "Name's Mike," he said quietly. "Vietnam, 69 to 71. "Afghanistan," Tim replied, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. "2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines." Mike nodded, understanding everything that wasn't said. "Your brother?" he asked softly. Tim's eyes moved to the setting sun. "Mark, Operation Red Wings area. He saved my life." The color guard stood at attention, the flag illuminated by the evening light. One by one, the bikers who had maintained the vigil introduced themselves. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Some were combat veterans. Others were first responders. A few were simply Americans who understood the meaning of sacrifice. From her porch, Sarah Johnson watched as Tim shared something with the bikers. A small, worn photograph. Even from a distance, she could see it showed 2 identical young men in Marine dress blues, arms around each other's shoulders, sporting matching grins. The crowd had thinned, but those who remained witnessed something extraordinary. The bikers, still forming their protective circle, began sharing their own stories of brothers lost, of promises kept, of a brotherhood that transcended time and circumstance. "This is what Memorial Day really means," Mike announced, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Not the parades, not the speeches. This right here, remembering, honoring, standing together." As the stars began to appear over the Capitol, Tim turned to address the remaining onlookers. His voice was tired but clear. "Today, I stood for my brother Mark, but I wasn't standing alone. I never was." He looked at the bikers, then at the crowd. "None of us are ever alone if we just open our eyes and see each other, really see each other." 1 year later, on another Memorial Day, Constitution Avenue would witness something unprecedented. Hundreds of motorcycles escorting a lone Marine to his post. Thousands of citizens, many wearing leather vests over their Sunday best, joining in a day-long salute. But that's another story. For now, as the last light faded from the Washington sky, Sarah Johnson watched Tim climb onto the back of Mike's motorcycle. The unlikely brotherhood roared off into the night, leaving behind a changed city and a powerful reminder. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in silence, under a scorching sun, between those brave enough to stand together.